One big thing.
Sitting in my office today, the sun was streaming in the windows the way it does in the winter, casting long shadows on the walls. It's cold outside, January the 15th. That's the day my dad died. The shadows were the same that day. My mom walked in and she hugged me and she said, "Your father's at peace." It was 31 years ago. How is that even possible? How can you even process something that makes as little sense as that? That I'm older now than he ever got to be. That he saw so little of the life that his son got to live. He was really proud of his boy, not that I had given him that much to feel that way about. But what I'd give to have just 5 minutes today to tell him how the story's gone since 1988. To introduce him to the grandkids, one of whom is named Sam, after him. I've always avoided focusing on the day of his passing, and I've chosen to talk about birthdays instead, to celebrate them, not obsess about the death day. But this year, I'm surrounded by it. My good friend Jill buried her dad today. She said she wanted to speak at his funeral, but wasn't sure she could do it. I told her to think about love, told her she could, and she'd be glad she did. Well, she did, and I'm told she was great. Tomorrow, I head to Maryland to be there for one of my boys who just lost his dad. That funeral is Thursday morning. And I realize that I've been pretty good at giving advice to those who deal with this specific pain. I tell them when the grief comes not to run from it, not to bury it, because it grows and it gets a whole lot heavier to carry around, because it does. I encourage my friends to share it, to articulate it, to say it out loud. It's time to take my own advice. Today isn't worse than another day, it's just another day. But to try to swallow it and ignore it today would be a mistake. So maybe this is selfish to do it here, but it's intentional because we all have our pain to deal with. And maybe it helps somebody else or encourages someone to tell a loved one who's still here how you feel. Maybe it doesn't. Either way, I miss you, Dad, today and every day. And I hope you'd be proud of how it all turned out. We'll be back on Thursday. Neil and Stan are next.
One big thing.
Nobody's told me anything, and I don't have a concern. I'll just wait and see. My key works on Monday.
I told you Sunday night the key wasn't going to work, and it didn't. After the Dan Snyder Caravan sped out of FedEx Field minutes after yet another embarrassing home loss, the end for Jay Gruden was a formality. They summoned him at 5 a.m. Monday morning. Man, if that's me, I'm going to go ahead and catch these Z's, and I will see you all a bit later. You can fire me at lunch. What difference does any of it make? And that's a question you could ask about this entire situation. Honestly, as long as the song remains the same at the top, what's ever going to be different? So far, under Dan Snyder, the team has been coached by the respected coordinator, Norv Turner, the respected NFL head coach, Marty Schottenheimer, who won his last 5 to get to 500, only to be fired after 1 year to be replaced by the college guy, Steve Spurrier, who called in his resignation from the golf course.
Not very good.
He was replaced by Redskins royalty, Coach Joe, who was under 500 and replaced by Jim Zorn, best described as the guy who would take the job. He went 12-20, just like Steve Spurrier, who was replaced by the coach who won Super Bowls elsewhere. Mike Shanahan got twice as long, 64 games, and he won twice as many games, 24. The symmetry is astounding. He was replaced by the up-and-coming coordinator who was fired after the 0-5 start. So if we're playing bingo, we've done respected coordinator, respected coach, college legend, organizational legend, guy who would take the job, Super Bowl winner, up-and-coming coordinator. What's left to try? The only coach that didn't have a losing record was Marty, and he was given exactly 1 year. It's never the owner or the GM, it's always someone else's fault. And that is a 2-decade summary of Dan Snyder ownership. So is the fact that FedEx Field has been co-opted by rival fan bases like an 82,000-seat banquet hall available for weddings, birthdays, bar mitzvahs, or NFL games. The last 4 home games has been completely overrun by fans of the Eagles, Cowboys, Bears, and Patriots. If not for them, it would have been mostly empty. Redskins lost all those games by a total of 79 points. Rock bottom isn't a moment, it is a seemingly perpetual state. And I've been trying to find the parallel for the systemic collapse that has happened here, and I just cannot. Snyder grew up there, the same time I did, when Washington was winning 3 Super Bowls in less than a decade. They were a revered franchise that was so intricately woven into the culture of the region. They bridged the racial and socioeconomic differences. They brought together all of the DMV.
Season tickets had a waiting list decades long. Now you can't give them away. Those 3 hours on Sundays in the fall used to be off limits for anything other than Redskin games. Now they're endured if they're acknowledged at all. And I see pieces about how Snyder and Allen must create a winning culture once and for all. What? This is the culture. It's 20 years of this. This is what they are. They had Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan and Matt LaFleur in their building and let them go to become coaches elsewhere. Who are they going to convince to take the gig when everybody knows the score? The owner has said time and time again he would step back and let the football people do their job. But this spring he wanted a quarterback, so he took over the draft for the first round and he selected him. Meanwhile, GM Bruce Allen continues in his role, telling everybody just how close they've been to the playoffs the past couple of years. Then at Monday's presser, he's got the audacity to tell the world this.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
Imagine taking liberties with reality like that, selling that line and thinking anyone but you buys it. He wouldn't have seemed less self-aware had he showed up to the press conference nude. Mostly, this is just an accounting, a repeating of the facts that will continue unabated as long as things remain status quo. Nothing changes because nothing ever does. It's a treadmill to nowhere. That last part, that's my opinion. And I'd love to be wrong. You want to bet against a couple decades?
One big thing.
I spoke about Tom Izzo last night on the show. It was not a surprise to see it become a talking point on shows and on social media. This isn't about snowflakes or being soft. It is about a gigantic problem we have not only allowed to happen in society, but go out of our way to ensure gets worse. People seem to have a real issue when they're held accountable or if others are too harshly. We're so concerned with if anyone has had their feelings hurt that we lose sight of this fact. Life has a scoreboard. The world will be difficult, and we do nobody any favors when we coddle them to the point that they never hear criticism or hear a harsh word or have to face any adversity. Because when nobody in a job interview or negotiation stops to ask about your feelings and then you don't get the job or you don't get the contract, what are you going to do? Demand the world stop being mean to you? The college admissions scandal is a great example of this. They say you should prepare your kids for the path, not the path for your kids. You cannot eliminate every challenge or adversity they might face, because if you do, what have you accomplished? We're so concerned with safe spaces and not saying mean things that when a coach gets on a player, it's seen by some of you as out of bounds. And that is insane to me. Is that the only way to get your point across? No. You can go about it differently. But you notice who didn't have a problem with it? Michigan State. Did you notice what seniors Cassius Winston and Matt McQuaid did? They told Izzo, we got this, because they have a voice. They've been empowered in a family dynamic that occasionally gets volatile, because there's a scoreboard and they're trying to win. You know who else didn't have a problem with it? The freshman who was getting the what for, Aaron Henry. His social media, as well as the accounts of past Spartans like Miles Bridges and Draymond Green and countless other Spartans, gave insights into why they didn't and don't have a problem with it. But that doesn't matter to people who don't really want context. They just want to be mad and be offended. So be good and mad about how Tom Izzo yelled at his players. His players, past and present, have a rare loyalty to him. He doesn't have a transfer problem. He has the opposite. A bunch of four-year guys, the overwhelming majority of whom have gotten to Final Fours in part because of being held accountable the way he holds them accountable. You don't like it? Fine. Don't send your kid there. But stop being offended by things that don't concern you, because they're not.
One big thing.
Do you see it? The technician asked as I sat with my wife at the ultrasound. We'd been convinced our first child was a boy, how she was carrying the baby, wives' tales, what have you. So when I hear, do you see it? Well, I'm looking for it, right? But all I see is a blob, and she says, it's a girl. I was like, it's a what? A girl, huh? I dropped my wife back at school where she was teaching at the time, went right to my office at home and Googled how to raise a girl. I suppose I had convinced myself had it been a boy, I just would have taught him how to throw a four-seam fastball, handed him a beer and said, that's about it, son, you'll figure out the rest. My brother-in-law had a great line when I told him about the Google search. Scotty, he said, you wouldn't have any idea how to raise a boy either. It's not in a book. He's right. That little girl turned 6 today. She's smart and kind and beautiful. I watched her at the playground at school earlier this week when I picked her up, hair blowing in the wind on a perfect day.
laughing and running, just playing with her friends. And I had a stupid smile glued on my face, the joy of watching a happy little girl in a moment that she forgot the moment she sat down in the car seat. It's all going too fast, I thought. You want to dig in your heels and fight that clock on the wall and make the moments last, but they don't. That's okay though, because I'm filing moments away like the other day for later. And there's a real fear you have when you have children so late about the things you might miss. So maybe I'm more in tune with enjoying the time I have right now. I am greedy about making them all count. And I would just say this to any man out there who's about to become a dad for the first time. Maybe you grew up in sports like me. Maybe you're thinking you want a boy. And I get it. I do. That was me. And my sons are a joy to me. But let me tell you a secret, fellas. Root for them to tell you it's a girl. There's no greater love you'll ever know, and nothing that will change your worldview more than holding a little girl and imagining the world through her eyes, wanting to be for her the very best version of yourself in the hopes that you might be worthy of the way she looks at you, being worth being adored by her. I ask her 10 times a day, what do you know? Daddy loves Lila, she says. More than you'll ever know, little girl. It's her birthday today. I got the gift, May 9th. 2013.
One big thing.
There are many paths to earn one of the 156 spots to compete in the Open Championship, which is the oldest major in golf. 7 ways to be exempt, as well as local and final qualifying. This is a picture of Brandon Matthews and a fan at an event where a spot was available, and I want to tell you a story about him. In Buenos Aires, at a Latino America event where the winner earns a spot in the Open, Matthews was on the 3rd hole of a playoff. He had an 8-footer for birdie to extend it to a 4th hole after Ricardo Celia buried a 30-footer of his own. As Matthews explained to GolfChannel.com, I got over the putt, took the putter back, and heard kind of a yelp or a scream. I kind of flinched on the putt and immediately knew I missed it. An understandably disappointed Matthews was approached in the locker room by the tournament director, who explained that the fan who yelled was a man with Down syndrome who'd gotten excited and lost control of his emotions. Matthews said, "Take me to him." As he explained to the Golf Channel, quote, "I was around mental disability growing up, and I have a soft spot in my heart for it. Those are really special people. I felt so terrible that I was even upset. I just wanted to make sure that he didn't feel bad. I didn't want anyone to be mad at him. I didn't want him to be mad at himself. I wanted to make sure he knew that I wasn't mad. That's all I wanted to do." Matthews, who is one of the longest hitters on earth, is a Temple grad who went through a tough summer of missed cuts and swing changes, and he's one of thousands out there grinding away on smaller tours with the hope of getting to the big one. A spot in the Open could have been a huge step, his first start in a major. Would he have made the putt? Who knows? Would he have won the playoff? I don't know that either. But if he had, I wouldn't have heard about it. But this did happen, and this is how he handled it. A moment of pure and uncommon class and humanity after a moment of bitter disappointment. A moment worth sharing and a guy worth rooting for. Proof once again of the old adage that adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it. I don't know how rigid the rules are. If the 156-man field is set in stone, I'm sure it is. But maybe the R&A can make room for 157 at Royal St. George's. The tee times start at first light. They go all day, and it stays light until like 10 o'clock in this part of the world in July. What's one more? One who might not be the champion golfer of the year, but who championed humanity half a world away in Argentina.
One big thing.
I try to explain this place to people, and it's difficult if you've never seen it. Somehow we've become this ubiquitous presence in your life, for some of it, maybe all of it. On in the corner of the bar, or your dorm, or your bedroom when you go to sleep, or your kitchen in the morning when you're getting up to get the kids off to school. Sometimes passively consuming, sometimes intently, or as Kenny Mayne has often said, we're background noise for sex. God, I hope not. Mood killer right here, no good. For 40 years, thousands of men and women have come to work 24/7, 365. Keith Olbermann described us as factory workers in a factory town in Brian Curtis's Ringer article this week about the big show. Glamorous? No, not really, but there's value in the work, and we put it in to earn and maintain the relationship that we have with you. I remember driving home after a show as a blizzard was arriving, and it was supposed to be a big one. The governor had banned all non-essential vehicles from the roads. A cop pulls up beside me on Route 84, and I just gave him a look, and A shrug. He smiled, nodded. The show must go on. We can't exactly run bars in tone because there's some snow in the forecast. Every day's different. Most of them are a lot of fun, but nights like these, they're more than a little surreal because Dan and Keith, they weren't just a show, they were the big show. The yardstick the rest of us are judged by even now, and none of us really measure up. Any of us who came after stand on the shoulders of what they accomplished. It's why the very first guest we had on this version of SportsCenter was Dan. But Dan and Keith stood on the shoulders of so many others too. Grand and Mies, Berman and Lee, Gumbel, Marciano, Leonard, and on, the originals who built the joint. They planted a tiny little acorn and it grew into this mighty oak. Who knew? Certainly nobody then could have imagined the place this network would carve out in the zeitgeist. It's been said often, and it's worth it every time, that for every one of us you see, there have been hundreds behind the scenes, and all of them, past and present, are the place. They have been the fuel that makes the engine go, and it requires a staggering amount of energy and commitment to do so. Because one show ends and the tease for another is rolling, which means a camera is getting a shot, and a director is calling out cues, and one of us says, hello and welcome. It never really ends. Holidays and weekends often aren't, but in no way is this a sob story. We're not cops or teachers. We're servicemen. It's not some noble undertaking, honestly. We're a cable TV station in the middle of a small town in Connecticut that somehow became what it is, which is why, if you've never seen it, it's hard to explain. I will walk out tonight into the darkness in a mostly deserted parking lot of a town that went to sleep hours ago. I'll drive down an empty highway home, and I often wonder two things. Is all of this a ruse? I mean, are the cameras even on? Is any of this stuff plugged in? And I'll wonder how the hell it is that I get to be the one who does this at ESPN, my home, going on 20 years as they celebrate 40. And I will know a couple of things. I'm proud. It's my home. And I'm honored to call these men and women my colleagues.
I also wanted to thank the viewers. I wanted to have a nice thank you in memory of our dear friend Tom Mies, who meant so much to both Dan and myself, and of course to my tag team partner. Nothing will ever be the same again. Thank you for everything. Thank you for teaching me how to do this, and shut up.
Should I say something nice about you now?
If you can, 3 seconds.
Very fortunate to work with the most talented person in this business. He's now a newsman now, and I have one final word for him. Gone.
22 years later, here we sit. And I get the whole bit about Led Zeppelin, I do, and not wanting to do a reunion tour, but people, I'm sure, enjoy hearing the first few notes of Stairway to Heaven and knowing that you can still do it. I'm curious what you think about, you know.
What, about more of this?
Yeah, you know.
I'm doing this thing on every Monday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, yeah, okay, you tell management the hell with it. All right. Oh, no, I didn't dare you to do that. Okay.
I was going to say, I'd take my cues from you. I'm sitting next to the guy that wrote the book.
It was good.
Wasn't this enough, though?
It was fun. But, you know, the more I started thinking about it, you know what we should do?
What? What are you thinking about?
I think that we should announce right now that we should